Okay, so we're going to start with Illustrator and bringing the logo into Illustrator and then making a title card in 1920 by 1080 that we're going to import into After Effects to animate. So I wanted to go through the process first of when you get a logo, and this is just a PNG from the internet. When you get a logo, like what you can actually do before you start animating to make it easier on yourself when you bring it into After Effects. So I'm going to go in and just create a new Illustrator file, and I'm going to actually make it so if you go up here to this, there's a preset for film and video, and do HD TV 1080, and we can start there. Make sure it's in landscape mode and hit create. So what's kind of nice about Illustrator is it gives you these rulers and everything, and these are video safe bars. Here's a pixel ruler. These come standard when you open up a preset video file. This is also the transparent background. You can change this if you go to view, and it's down here, hide transparency grid, so you can just have it be white, and that's how I'm going to keep it like this for now. And I'm actually going to hide the rulers too. If you go right here, hide video rulers. So the first thing we can do is go into file and do place, and that lets you put any kind of image file in your Illustrator file. And what you do is you just kind of drag a box when you get it, and here it is. But what is going on here is actually it's a white logo on a white background, so you can't really see anything. So I'm going to go back and turn off the transparency grid. There you go. So that's what we have right now for the high point logo. And what I want to do, which is a really nice thing that Illustrator gives you, this isn't a very high quality logo, but I think it's a good thing to start with a kind of lo-fi version, so you can see what's possible with what Illustrator can do in image tracing. So if you go into Object, drop down, and there's a thing right here called Image Trace, and I have that selected. You can do that, but there's a toolbar right here. If you go to Window and select Image Trace from Window, you get this toolbar right here, which is really useful. And it gives you a preset, which is a default image tracing, because what it's supposed to do is it looks at the image and then it creates a vector version of that image. And if you have a logo like that, it makes it easier to do that kind of stuff, as opposed to like a picture of somebody is not really going to work in this. So it looks like it's only doing the outline of the image, which is just a white box. And that's because it's used to a white logo on a black background or a black logo on a white background, and it's not able to see anything right now. So what I'm going to do is take this logo into Photoshop and make a black background on it, and then make it a single image, and then bring that back in to Photoshop. Okay, so I just brought it back in after taking it into Photoshop and making a black background. This should make it easier to do an image trace. So let's try this. See, that's what you normally get. That's a default setting. That's not great, obviously, but there's ways to make it more refined. What's going to have to happen anyway is this will have to be rebuilt, the two circles, and then the Richmond, Virginia part, and barbershop and shave parlor. But I want to get this high point logo, like the actual text, I want that to be traced, and then we can go from there and rebuild it. let's see. So if we go into change the mode to black and white, we can try a black and white logo. That happens. So let's go into either that or line art. Nope. Yeah, okay. So low fidelity photo, black and white mode, and then there's all these other things we can mess with to refine it. So I'm just going to start messing with these sliders. And this is not bad because we're going to rebuild this other part anyway. I want to get this part separated out and refined. So obviously, as you're adding paths, as the amount of paths increase, the detail increases, but that also means there's a lot more information there to deal with, which we'll have to refine later. But it seems like, see, that's actually too much. And the pixelation from the image is now coming and being a part of that tracing, which is not what you want. This smoothing, here we go, it's getting better. It's kind of a little bit of a dance to find the right amount of all this stuff. Let's see. Turn the corners down so there's more. So if I turn the corners up, you can see how these sharp edges start showing up. Turn the corners down so it's good. You get smoother lines. Let's see. That's a mess. There we go. That's pretty good right there. And now what you can do is, so in the Properties tab in the toolbar for image trace, you have this quick action called Expand, where you convert the tracing objects to actual paths. You can do it there if you want, or if you go into the object drop down to image trace, you can do it this way too. So I'm going to do that, hit expand. Now you have, these are all vector paths now. And the first one that needs to go obviously is the black background. Now what happens when this gets expanded into paths, if you go into the layers tab, you can see right here that it's a group of paths, and it's a ton of them. That's okay, we're going to clean it up anyway and reduce the amount of paths. So first one to go is the compound path, which is the background. There we go. So you have that. This part can go. Oh, whoops. Let's see. So you have the selection tool, which selects entire objects, and you also have the direct selection tool, which you can, and when that mode gets selected, you can see how now there's path, there's anchor points to mess around with. That's with the direct selection tool. So I could actually, if I wanted to, I could select each point and move them around, which is not what I want to do right now. But I do want to use this tool to select individual aspects of this trace, which the first ones right here are this white border. I'm just going to delete that. And let's see, I'm going to keep these lines for now, just so we know where they are. Actually, the lines themselves don't seem too bad. That one's a little bit too rough. Anyway, obviously we have to rebuild the dots in the Richmond, Virginia, and the barbershop and shave parlor. So we have that part we have to do. I'm going to also select this black part and delete it. So now it's completely transparent. Cool. thing that's really bad is right here, which is nice. This can be redone pretty easily. So what I'm going to do, see if I want to get rid of this point, if I select it and hit delete, it's gone, but you can see the blue line of the path ends right there and then picks up right there again. So there's nothing going on in between these 2 points, which is bad. So when you want to get rid of a point like that, but keep the path closed, you go to the pen tool, which is right here, and if you zoom in close enough, so go to the pen tool, and you see how it goes from that asterisk to the minus sign. That means when you go over a point, you can delete it, but keep the path closed. So I'm going to delete those 2 points. That's a nice straight line now. I'm going to go to the other one right here, and I'm going to go to this one right here and do the same thing. So I'll go to the pen tool and delete this. Now that's bad right now. If you hold down Alt with that pen tool, you can redraw the handles. Okay, great. So these are set up now. This is its separate path, separate path. This is all one separate path. That's a separate path, separate path. That's all one path too. So that's not too bad, because we're going to do a cool write-on animation where we're going to write this on as it comes across. And that's good to have these set up like this to reveal them, to make them look like they're being written on. And we'll get there in a second when we get to After Effects. So what I'm going to do, and so now we go back to this layer window, and like there's just pass and pass and pass, which is not what we really want. So what I'm going to show you is to make some different layers for each part of this, because the layer system is going to transfer over into After Effects. So you'll have the whole logo laid out, and you'll have the ability to separate out everything in After Effects without having to redo anything, which is great. So if I select this one, I select these paths, and if I held down Control X and cut, it disappears. I'll go in over here and make a new layer. Let's see right here. Double click, I'm going to call it High Point. As long as I have this layer selected, I can do Shift Control V to paste it. And what that does, as opposed to just Control V, is it pastes it in the same place as it was cut from. So if I was over here and I just hit paste, it just pastes it right in the middle of the screen. And so I would lose that exact placement that it had initially. So by doing Shift Control V, you can paste back in place. And now what I've done is I've basically cut those things out from a previous layer and then moved it to a new layer. So now if I turn layer 1 off, that's everything else. And then layer 2, or the high point layer, is just the text, which is perfect. And what I'm going to do instead, in addition, I'm going to do actually a layer for each section of the high point logo that's its own path. So I'm going to select this one first, cut that, go to this layer right here, Shift Command V, paste it back in place, make this the H. Select this part, cut that, new layer, Shift Command V, paste that back in place, and then just I'm going to call that line 1, and then select this, cut that, new layer, Shift Command V, call that IGH, and then that, like that. I'm going to call this P line. Get some new layers going. Okay. Cut that, paste that. I'm just going to call this P curve. And then select this one, cut that, Shift Command V, paste that in place. Just call that oint. Great. Now they are all separated out into their own different layers. And rebuild this, which I'll use a type on a path tool. To get that. I'm going to select these paths and just delete them. All these dots too. So this is not ideal, the way to do it with the direct selection tool, because all you can do when you click and drag is draw a box, and then you end up getting a bunch of stuff like that. So there's another tool called the lasso tool, which is really nice. But first of all, I'm going to change all this to black, like that. And then what I'm going to do is turn off this transparency grid by going to View, Hide Transparency Grid. That'll make it easier to see what I'm talking about with the direct selection tool. So now, that's all you can really do with the direct selection tool if you want to select a lot of points, is just to draw a box, which is not helpful when I want to draw, to get all these letters in here and delete them, but keep these lines. So you have this other tool called the lasso tool, which is, let's see, where'd it go? Yeah, it's right there. The lasso tool, and that allows you to draw any type of line as a selection. So what I'm going to do is just come down here like this, delete, perfect. Great. That's a pretty solid logo right there. And it's all vector, which is amazing. Very powerful. Okay, so I'm going to save this. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do. Okay, great. These are all separate lines. Awesome. And then just to do it the right way, I'll separate all these paths out into different layers. Okay, great. And then this will be the text line. So I'm just going to make an ellipse. Now, the best part about, there's a nice little shortcut to do an ellipse. So if I just click and drag, you get this, which you can't make sure it's perfect. If you hold down Shift, it'll stay perfect no matter how big you make it. And then if I hold down Alt, it'll actually center from where I clicked and not and not come like this. So Shift plus Alt does this, which is great. So I'm actually going to go to the middle of this logo and Shift plus Alt to get that. I'm going to change this, just flip this to a stroke, and then make sure it is in the center. That's not bad. Okay, so type on a path tool in the text object lets you type on this path. So the best way to get this to be completely centered that I've found is if I move these two things. These are the beginning and the end of the text line. If I move them to be right in the middle point, like the median of the circle, like this, and then change the paragraph setting to from left justified to center justified, it'll get right in the middle. That's what you want. And you can also just still adjust that circle. This needs to be like 500. There we go. Okay, cool. And then the same thing for this bottom part, which is actually really easy. All I gotta do is just copy and paste in place this thing and then flip the text upside down. I'll show you how to do that. So I'll just copy that and then paste in place. Now we have, now there's two. And I'm going to flip these around. So now what you can do is if you go to type drop down, type on a path, and then type on a path options, you can hit this button called flip. And if I hit preview, you'll see what happens. So if I hit flip, boom, look at that. That's awesome. Okay. Now it looks like it needs to be a little bit smaller. Just a tiny bit. There we go. And then I'm just going to adjust these margins so that it kind of sits up like that. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's definitely better than, it's all been recreated and now it's super sharp in vector. So here's the original, just so you can compare. That's not bad. It's pretty close. I'm going to change this to an ampersand. And then make it just a little bit bigger. There we go. Yeah, it's pretty close. It's pretty good. Save that. Delete this. I'm also going to separate these out into different layers, the Richmond, Virginia part and the barbershop and shave parlor part, to be their own layers. That's awesome. Okay, so now here is your logo prepped for After Effects. You've got everything separated out into different layers. And that's all going to transfer over into After Effects too, which I'll show you in a second. So this is all separated out. This is prepped for animation. I think it's easier to show you the general interface of After Effects when there's a project to do and there's files to import and everything. So I'm just going to go through a quick overview of what the basic interface looks like and what it does, and then it'll make a lot more sense once we start doing something in After Effects. Okay, so first thing, this is your project pane or panel, one of the two. That's where all your files will go. Compositions and videos or images or anything, they all will get listed here. And then this is where you'll start seeing a composition once you make one. And you can click this button obviously to do it, but we'll do a different thing when we import the High Point logo. Down here is the timeline. This is where the layers are laid out, and this is where you animate. This is where all the magic happens. These are all your effects right here. There are a ton of effects, which is amazing. It's easier to just search for one right here than to try and dig through all these drop downs. This is also right here in the effect drop down too. And then this is your character. Same thing, exactly the same thing as Photoshop and Illustrator for text. This is how you preview. There's different ways of previewing back your animations. That's the thing about After Effects. It's kind of annoying. You hardly ever get to see anything in real time. And you have to preview it and do a RAM preview. That's what they call it. To see anything at full speed. And it depends on how much RAM you have and how powerful your computer is to see how much of your animation in real time. This is an info panel. This just shows you color and coordinates. And that's the opening, like basic layout for After Effects. So we'll start doing, this will make a lot more sense now when I import a file. And the best thing to, there's ways to do it. Obviously, there's several different ways to do the same thing in any of these programs. You can go into File, Import right here, if you want to, or you can just go into the Project panel and double-click empty space. It'll bring up an import dialog box. So I'm going to go in to the project, and you find the After Effects in Adobe Illustrator file right here for the High Point logo. And there's a couple cool things you can do before you hit import. And the first thing by default it's set to is import as footage, which if you do that, I'll just show you what happens. If you import it as footage and you double click on it to preview it and turn this, so right down here there's a couple buttons for your view. One of them is a transparency grid. So if I import this thing as footage, it comes as one single layer. It's basically an image file. And it's not what you want because none of these layers have been imported. And so you're just getting a flat image, and that's not what you want. So I'm going to delete that. Go back to import. Now, when I select this and do import as footage, I can change it to a composition and retain the layer sizes. And what that does is the document size that we set in Illustrator gets retained, which is a 1920 by 1080 video size, which is perfect. So if I select that, and then I can actually check this box too. This is new in a newer version of After Effects. It'll make a composition based on all these things. So hit import. Now you get a folder with all the layers that we set out in Illustrator before, and they're all labeled and everything. And then right down here, this is the composition. This little icon right here means composition. And it's already set up, and if I just double click on it, it opens up. Now this makes a lot more sense in After Effects, I feel like, when you start actually using it as opposed to a blank canvas. So this is the composition. Here are all the different layers, and you can see how it highlights with that bounding box type thing as I roll over these layers. There's a really, now when you have a laptop and you have one screen, it can be really annoying to do everything in After Effects, because I love having two screens for After Effects, where one screen is just dedicated entirely to what's inside the timeline. But if you have one screen and a laptop, there's a really nice shortcut to maximize all these windows immediately, whatever window your cursor is over. So if you hit tilde, which is that button to the left of the number 1 on your keyboard, it expands that panel to be full frame. And that is just wherever your mouse is hanging over. So if it's over here, if I hit tilde, full screen's that. Hit tilde again, it goes back. Same with this. It's super helpful, really, really helpful for when you have a small single screen to do work in After Effects. You know, even these too, which can be, doesn't really help, but it does. It offers you that if you want it. Anyway, so I like having a full screen of the timeline, because once you start doing animations and like you expand this stuff, it just fills up the screen really quickly. So there's that. So you can't see anything obviously because it's black, so we can turn on right here transparency grid. Then you can see everything. And now we can go again, like we just had in Illustrator, we can start isolating these layers. And you have an awesome layered vector logo to start animating. So in the next one, we'll get a little bit deeper into After Effects, and I'll show you these parameters for each layer, the transform parameters, and how to animate those, and some shortcuts that are really helpful to do that stuff. Okay.